First of all, I want to briefly recall the situation in Ukraine before the operation of the Russian army and why this operation was inevitable. The events in Ukraine were preceded by the long process of gradual establishment of control over the country by the West. The legitimate government in Ukraine was overthrown after successful military political operation in the winter of 2013-2014, in accordance with the traditional scenario of color revolutions. This revolution was prepared, organized, and legitimized by the United States and its allies. After February 22nd, 2014, a total dictatorship was established. Any political discussion was prohibited. Its main ideology was Russophobia and glorification of Nazi accomplices and World War II. The elimination of the Russian language in all spheres of society. But Russian is native to 90% of the country's population. The ban on any sources of information that have a point of view different from the official one. The main political and economic course of the state is to break traditional ties with Russia, focus on the European Union and NATO. This was unacceptable for the majority of the population and suicidal for the economy. Why has this ideology become dominant? Hitler turned the great German nation into Nazis in the second years without using the information technologies currently available. Today, we see in Ukraine the result of 8 years of careful, thought work in conditions of total dictatorship, which was legalized by the West. The territory of Ukraine was increasingly being military developed by NATO countries. Ukraine was not a member of NATO, but this wasn't an obstacle to using Ukraine as battering ram against Russia. After the coup of 2014, the constitution of Ukraine included article on joining NATO and European Union as the goals of the states, like a purpose of the state. Join an organization cannot be purpose. It can only be a means to achieve any purpose. NATO began to create its base in Ukraine. Also, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, 30 biological laboratories were created in Ukraine. That was confirmed by the American side. With a high degrees of probability, we can say that one of the tasks of the United States and its allies is to create bioagents capable of selectively infecting various ethnic groups of population. In our case, the Slavic population living in the territory of Russia. Documents published by the Ministry of Defense indicate the studies of the avian influenza virus, including the most dangerous strain of H5N1, were underway in Ukraine. In Ukraine, methods were developed by enhancing the pathogenic properties of bacteria. Using genetic engineering methods, it would be possible to achieve the creation of combat strains. The Americans could specifically infect wild birds so that they fly to the territory of probable enemy, which for the United States is the Russian Federation. This as well as Zelensky's statement about the plans to create dirty nuclear weapons, set Russia a task to need to be solved. All Russia's calls to Western partners to take into account direct vital interest in the field of security were not just ignored, but Washington deliberately aggravated the situation. Remember how Zelensky's statement about the desire to obtain nuclear weapons was applauded, stating the participants of security conference in Munich. Moreover, an outright provocation was being prepared, which has documentary evidence. Why couldn't President Putin have done otherwise? Does anyone have any doubts that the Ukrainian army would have launched a full-scale invasion on the territory of Lugansk and Donetsk Republic? Does anyone really doubt it? More than 120,000 personnel, 345 tanks, 2,160 armored combat vehicles, 820 artillery and mortar guns, 160 multi-payload rocket launchers, including the 300 millimeters rocket launchers Smerch. The Ukrainian army in the 20th of February, that is on the eve of the events, created clear lane through the minefields. Is it for defense? Subversive groups were thrown not only into the territory of Donetsk and Lugansk Republic, but also into Russian when terrorist attacks. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Reznikov, was a big fan of the Croatian Operation Oluya. It was a famous operation in Bosnia War in '95. Went to Croatia to study for experience. He invited the relevant specialists from Croatia to Ukraine. Plans with dates of the invasions are confirmed by documents received by Russian intelligence. President Ukraine Zelensky announced mobilization on February 23rd. What if this is not preparation for war? Before President Putin announced the operation, what could President Putin have done? Did he have to wait for the beginning of aggression from Ukraine for the picture of victims and destruction? How many could have died in the fire of the first hours? The 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 nationalist battalions with the local population wouldn't stand on the ceremony and would act like an American in Iraq. They would smash houses and communications without thinking about the number of compositions of victims. And would Russia be able to show evidence in Ukraine crimes even in such case? Was it necessary to sacrifice thousands of lives for a picture that no Western or Ukrainian media wouldn't have shown in any way? Then how to knock out the Nazis from the residential quarters? Russia would be to blame in any case. In this case, the Western media wouldn't have noticed anything, but they wouldn't show that the Russian government has done nothing to protect its fellow citizens. At the same time, no sound was heard from any of them about the fate of those who were terrorized by the Ukraine in the Donbass for 8 years. The war in Donbass, unleashed by the West by the hands of Ukraine, claimed 13,000 lives. The dates of beginning of the so-called Russian aggressions, of course, were known to London and Washington. They didn't adopt Russia's immediate response, but perhaps they didn't assume preventive action and such a scale retaliatory strike. Well, it's beginning of hostilities is more or less clear. Was it necessary to stop at the border of the Lugansk and Donetsk republics within the front line before the start of the operation? The terrorist essence of the Kiev regime would not have changed, just as in the case of the expansion of the Lugansk and Donetsk republic to the borders specified in the constitution of the republic corresponding to the border of the Lugansk and Donetsk region within Ukraine. Russia would have received a full set of current sanctions. The territory of Ukraine would have continued to be developed and under control by NATO countries. And now the Ukrainian army acts like a terrorist. It hides behind civilians, places artillery at the residential buildings, shoots its soldiers who do not want to fight, does not tell the civilians to leave. According to available information, NATO planned the actual occupation of Ukraine since December 2021. Russia has received data on NATO's plans to deploy 2 military land brigades, 1 naval, 1 air, and an air brigade with possibilities of carrying nuclear warheads on the territory of Ukraine. The remaining territory of Ukraine would be annulled for the West. In the south, in the Charkov, the base of British fleet, NATO bases across the countries, missiles aimed at Russia on the border with Russia, and like jackpot, monkey with a grenade, Zelensky with a nuclear bomb. The victims and the much suffered during the liberation of the Lugansk People Republic and Donetsk People Republic would be meaningless without the cleansing of the whole of Ukraine from Nazi ideology that has become a state. It would be a source of constant military terrorist threat. Missiles in the Chernihiv and Sum region with a flight time of 4 minutes to Moscow, with the full range of international sanctions, it's not the best options for ending the conflict, which wouldn't have been finished. Those who in Ukraine are waiting for liberation from Nazi occupation were very afraid of this. They are sure that any freezing on the conflict in any part of Ukraine would lead to a punitive operation and Gestapo purges of the population not loyal enough to the regime. Thanks to the sanctions and the absence of the need for Russia to comply with the conditions imposed from the outside since 1991 for the functioning of the domestic economy. There are opportunities to restore economic sovereignty. There is no need to follow the rules of International Monetary Fund. Capital outflow will finally be stopped. It is positive and necessary to load domestic enterprises, direct ruble investment in research and development, and finally restore the domestic aircraft, automotive, electronics, and other industries. It's a pity it didn't start in 2014. The transition to the new economy is not just possible, it's its widest window of opportunity, and there are resources for the transitions. It is possible to do through making the right administrative decisions while respecting the sovereign interests of the state and public support of country's leadership at the highest level. Russia has everything it needs: access natural resources, the availability of technologies or scientific base for their development, sufficient financial resources, even despite the robbery of part of the Russian gold reserves by the civilized West. In addition to this, Russia has partners who don't take part in anti-Russian sanctions: China, Brazil, Argentina, Iran, Pakistan, I hope India, and many other countries which their technologies, resources, and market. Russia can wage a full-fledged economic war against European Union, which is connected, of course, with the cessation of supplies of oil, gas, and coal to Europe. Russia has not yet begun to apply sanctions that are painful for European Union and United States: oil, gas, wheat, corn, inert gas, uranium, palladium, etc. The military operation in Ukraine will be over sooner or later. Wounds of grievances will gradually heal. Ukrainian enterprises that were not finally killed with European reforms will gradually restore ties with Russian suppliers and buyers. Residents of the current territory of Ukraine will return to their home and to their jobs. The prospects will be completely different. Instead of stable degradation, deindustrialization, and depopulation, there will be opportunities to rapid development. Ukraine, during the last 10 years, lost 10 million people. They left Ukraine territory. And it's so great government on Ukraine. It's so democratic. Yes, the United States has achieved certain goals with the help of the conflicts and exposing Russia as an aggressor. It was possible to unite Europe into a single anti-Russian front to inflict a wound in the relations of Ukrainian and Russians, which will not be easy to heal, to get an endless reason for anti-Russian sanctions. But sanctions would have been invented under any other pretext. And their task is not only damage Russia, but it's to derail the European economy, defeat it, and make it dependent of the next American Marshall Plan again. The main thing today is the cessation of hostilities by Ukraine, not Russia. It's hardly possible to wait from a call from the Ukrainian authorities to save the lives of their citizens. And if the residents of Ukraine want to blame someone for the victims and destruction, they should turn to the Kyiv authorities, to London and Washington. It's on their hands the blood of those who are dying in Ukraine. The Russian leadership has indicated two main goals among the objectives of the operation in Ukraine: demilitarization and denazification. The first one basically doesn't cause any question. I mean, the demilitarization, it will be soon finished. It will be solved without with minimization of victims and destruction. That is why the Russian army is moving slowly It doesn't act in American way. It doesn't conduct carpet bombing and does not target civilians. The second task is more difficult. It requires the establishment of control over the territory, information work with the population, changes in the activities of media, changes the school curriculum, and so on. 8 years have not been in vain. The process will take some time, but still the return of population to common sense and its real history and culture will be more natural than imposition of Nazi ideology. Of course, the experience of the Nazification will be, which was carried out in Germany and Austria after the Second World War, will be used, and everything going on. This process will be finished soon. Thank you very much.